Hey, how's everybody doing today? Today we're going to look at Psalm 101. If you want to turn there, you can. And I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to kind of talk about how it can apply to us. Psalm 101, this is a psalm of David. I will sing of your love and justice, Lord. I will praise you with songs. I will be careful to live a blameless life. When will you come to help me? I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. I hate all who deal crookedly. I will have nothing to do with them. I will reject perverse ideas and stay away from every evil. I will not tolerate people who slander their neighbors. I will not endure conceit and pride. I will search for faithful people to be my companions. Only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. I will not allow deceivers to serve in my house, and liars will not stay in my presence. My daily task will be to ferret out the wicked and free the city of the Lord from their grip. You know, we live in a time where people would look at someone that lived by the attitudes that David is bringing forth here and say, well, isn't he all judgy? And sometimes we as Christians forget, we come to God for comfort. We come to him for provision. We come to him in times of need. But we also always need to remember that he's also a God of justice, a God of righteousness, and a God of holiness. And he doesn't just say, hey, go do whatever you want, I'm going to be there. He tells us the command is there to be holy as he is holy. And when you hear that word, holiness is a word I've been around my whole life. And I don't know that anyone hears that word and thinks, oh yeah, that reflects my life, because I'm a sinner. I'm sure you are too. And none of us would see ourselves as being equal to God in that realm of being without sin. But part of holiness, we think of holiness as being devoid of sin, which is impossible for us to do. But part of holiness is having an intolerance for sin in our presence. That's part of that holiness of God, is that he will not tolerate sin in his presence. That's the whole reason why Jesus needed to come and die on the cross for us. And part of that desire to live in holiness is to ask ourselves, how much sin are we becoming comfortable with? Are we tolerating in our own lives? He says, I will be careful to live a blameless life. Then he says, I will lead a life of integrity in my own home. That's really where integrity counts, isn't it? It's where who you are when no one else can see what you're doing is who you really are. And that can be a scary thought to us sometimes, because you know what? We all have areas where we struggle, areas where we fail, but a large part of it has to do with what we allow ourselves to become comfortable with. One of the things that he says right after that, he says, I will refuse to look at anything vile and vulgar. And, you can't help but think about the music you listen to, the magazines you look at, the books that you read, and in particular, the kind of entertainment that you watch, the television. And it's amazing how fast you can become accustomed to just a little bit more vulgarity, a little bit more language, maybe a little bit more suggestive clothing than you were used to before. And it raises your tolerance level of it. And that can become a dangerous thing, because the more tolerant we become of something, the greater the opportunity that we have to sin and to fail in that area. And the best thing that we can do is build up an intolerance. He said, I'm not going to look at anything vile and vulgar in my own home. We try to be very careful about what we watch in our house, what our family watches. Now, it's impossible to know in advance and to ferret out every single little thing that you don't agree with. I'm not talking about the occasional things that come in. I'm talking about, what are we getting comfortable with? Are we all right with this level? And if you become all right with that level, it's really not much of a jump to get to the next level. There was a time where back in the 50s, when they would show a married couple in their bedroom, they would be in separate beds. And it was a big deal when they showed them in the same bed, even though they had pajamas up to their necks and were, had covers up to, the tops of their shoulders or whatever. And the thing about that was that was just one level. Now, look, I don't necessarily say, I'm not saying that, we need to go back to portraying couples as sleeping in separate beds. There's a degree where you could see that as being not healthy too. But what I'm saying is that that was a big barrier. And then, showing this or talking about that. I mean, there was if you remember the show I Dream of Jeannie, there was a big debate, and the censors had a big fight for years about whether or not she could show her belly button. Now, I don't know about you, but they show a whole lot more than just belly buttons these days. And we've gotten accustomed to that little bit by little bit, is that those standards have slipped for us as a nation and maybe even our own homes, to where some of the things that we watch now that we wouldn't think twice about, our grandparents or our great-grandparents would be mortified. And I'm not trying to, I get it, these are different times, but here's the thing. Standards and decency should not change that much from generation to generation. And we need to be careful not to allow the world to influence what we say is acceptable and what we say is okay. So after that, he talks about, he talks about the things that he's not going to allow into his home as to what he sees and what he allows into his mind. And then the next thing he talks about is in his relationships. I'm not going to have relationships with people or alliances with people that do certain things. He says, look, I hate all who deal crookedly. I will have nothing to do with them. You're known sometimes by the people that you associate with. Now, I don't mean that we avoid or shun people that are not perfect, but we need to be careful about who we're associated with. If your best friends and the people that you constantly hang out with are people that cheat, lie, and steal, people are going to assume the same thing of you. And what it's going to do is that as you tolerate being around those folks on a regular basis, it's going to lower your standards some. You're going to have a hard time living up to the standards that Christ calls us to live up to when all the people around you are not. And so be careful about that. I'm going to skip down and I will reject perverse ideas, he says, and stay away from every evil. And then I will not tolerate people who slander their neighbors. I will not endure conceit and pride. And, I thought about, what does that mean about slandering your neighbors? And one of the things that popped into my mind is, how fast are we to flame somebody that's not following a rule like we think they should, or not raising their child the way that we think they should. We need to be careful about making judgments about other people's situation. I grew up with the premise of being taught, hey, mind your own business. What they do, that's, between them and their children, or between them and their parents, when I was a kid. And now we've gotten to the point where everybody feels free to judge everything everybody else does. And that's not a healthy atmosphere. Our job is not to go out and point the wrongs that everyone else commits. Our job is to model and to live out the right way to do things according to the Word of God. And so nowhere in there does it tell us to go around and correct every stranger's habits or things they do that we don't agree with. We need to be a people that are setting an example by the way that we love one another, the way that we love the people around us, and by living and doing things the right way. And how does he do that? He says, I will search for faithful people to be my companions. Only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. Now, he was a king, so he had servants and people that worked for him. I don't know how well that would go over if you to go up saying someone, I believe you are, above reproach, so I will allow you to serve me. I'm not saying you should do that. That's probably not a good idea. So he says, I will not allow deceivers to serve in my house, and liars will not stay in my presence. My daily task will be to ferret out the wicked and to free the city of the Lord from their grip. So, the bottom line is when we read a psalm like that, is to ask ourselves, how much tolerance of sin am I allowing in my personal life? How much tolerance of do I have to be around and to be closely associated with people who are living in contrast and in conflict with the Word of God. And this is David's pledge, was that he was going to surround himself with people that were people of integrity, with people whose word could be trusted. You know, that's one of the main things that I look for is I'm not looking for people that are going to tell me what I want to hear all the time. I'm looking for people that are going to tell me the truth in season and out of season. I'm looking for people, if they tell me they're going to do something, it's done. I'm looking for people that are not going to go around and reveal a confidence and are not going to trash, everybody they see that doesn't agree with them. What kind of person are we becoming? So that call is for all of us, that we're to be more like God. He starts out, I will sing of your love and justice. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Love and justice go together, and we need to learn as believers how to live in a way that models that in our private life that no one else sees, in who we associate ourselves with, and in what we do and say. I hope that was encouragement to you. Hope you guys have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good day.